Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Process Automation podcast from ABB. For the final installment of the season, we're setting our sights on the open sea, exploring how digitalization and automation are transforming routing services within the marine industry. Earlier in the series, Osku Kalake from ABB touched on how smarter systems are reshaping how ships plan their journeys, and we wanted to dive deeper. So today we'll unpack how modern routing systems are helping vessels save time, reduce fuel consumption, and enhance safety of operations. We'll also ask, with advances in weather modelling, predictive analytics, and real-time communication, which technologies are poised to make the biggest impact on the future of routing at sea? I'm Fran Scott, and this is the Process Automation podcast from ABB. In today's episode, I am joined by Greavette and Mark Streuper from ABB's Routing Solutions and Services. So to start with, let's just set the scene a little bit, because obviously when you talk about the marine industry, it covers so much. But here I want to zoom in to the merchant fleet. So Mark, could you break down to us this ecosystem of what is involved within the merchant fleet, please?
Yeah, so let's assume you are buying something which is being produced in China. And that could mean that there has to be raw material transported from Chile to China to produce something, then put it in a carton box, ship it into a container. That container goes on board on a 30 days voyage from China through the Suez Canal, Mediterranean, into Europe. That's a long way. That means your package in raw material and as a finished product is 60 days at sea.
So Michael, could you expand on this a little bit? Because obviously it's a complicated ecosystem and there are lots of different stakeholders with different priorities. So could you talk us through, I suppose, the life of a ship and how it goes about what we need it to do and how these different stakeholders, what's important to them?
Sure. So I think really focus, and Mark talked about kind of goods from raw material to end, but we're focusing on the logistics, on the movement, import, export side. And you've got the ship owner, that's the owner of the asset. The owner may operate the vessel or they may charter it out, or which is a term for kind of leasing out a vessel to the operator. And an operator, while the owner is focused on vessel performance and crewing the vessel and keeping the vessel safe, the operator may be their primary focus is on vessel efficiency, arrival times, fuel saving. So they have different priorities when looking at moving those goods from port A to port B. And then there's the cargo owner. The cargo owner may be the owner, maybe the operator, or maybe a total third party, because and so that cargo owner has their own priorities. And once we have those priorities and understand what each of those wants to achieve in a particular voyage, then we can proceed accordingly.
So Mark, could you talk us through in terms of what a ship has to go through to get from, like, say, A to B? What type of stuff does it come across? What do you have to think about?
Well, you have to deal with Mother Nature, with everything that she's throwing at you. Hurricanes, typhoons, tropical storms, freak waves. So you need all the information basically in front of you to sail the vessel as safe, as economical, and as efficient as possible.
And what kind of timescale are we looking at for your average journey?
An average journey from Asia to Europe, that's like 35 days.
Gosh, which, I don't often think about, because we're just used to that culture of instantaneousness. And so for 30 days, gosh, being at sea for 30 days and all the different things you're going to come across, so much to think about. One thing I'd love to dive into is how digitalization has changed maritime route optimization and what implications this had. So where did this all start? Michael, could you give us a bit of an introduction as to how this came about?
Well, I think the transition from analog to digitalization is really about being able to bring in and process so many more data inputs, and that translates to much more higher resolution and maybe more accurate output. And so in the past, we would have analysts that would receive maybe a daily noon report from the vessel to be able to understand where the vessel is. The weather forecasts were a lot, I would say maybe high confidence would be 4 to 5 days of a weather forecast, switching to climatology for longer. So if you have a 30-day voyage, the real key focus is on the next few days, right? That higher accuracy weather forecast. That's the traditional way. It was actually when I started 25 years ago in this space, I was on the operations side, and I was doing that, providing forecasts, working with vessels, and it was very one-to-one. I think that the key, and we talk about the kind of this evolution, whether it was an onboard system, like where the vessel, the master or the first officer or whomever is utilizing, it's one-to-one, putting in your route, getting optimization on that. If it's a shoreside support, where an analyst like I was, or the team that we have, and they're talking with the captain has the final say. We want to provide as much information, and let's say the weather route optimization sector provides that captain with as much information as possible, optimizing that route, looking at the forecast, what's coming up, because obviously the captain has so many things on their mind, right, to be able to handle. And we have that visibility and tools, and satellites, radar, everything like that we can provide. But it's still a very much one-to-one communication between the route optimization analyst and the captain, and the other players that we talked about, that the owners, the operators, they're usually in copy. They're aware of that discussion. They're providing us feedback on, well, we might want to have an arrival time specifically at the Suez Canal at this time. Can you optimize the voyage to arrive at this? Or berth for discharge, or many different going north versus south. The operators, the owners, they can have input on that. But again, it was traditionally a very one-to-one communication. And what we saw, shipping in general is a very old conservative business. And COVID, that lockdown, the requirement to really engage with your computer, with a digital medium, was a catalyst in our sector. We really saw all of the parties involved really starting to embrace a digitalized approach to how they do it, which in getting into now how we engage with a captain and an operator and all of the parties that are involved in the ecosystem. It's much more efficient. It's much more real time. There's many ways. And I think going back to Mark's initial point on the players involved, I mean, that has just allowed us to increase that ecosystem. You have ports involved that are receiving information. You have commodities information. The sky's the limit, really, on how you can connect into this hub and spoke model of digitalization.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us to where we are now, doesn't it? And one thing I'd love to sort of dive into is, in front of me, I have what is called a route comparison report. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of what you provide to people that you work with to be able for them to see how interacting with routes. So it's not necessarily about putting the ship on a different route, it's how to interact with that route, if that's right, isn't it?
It's basically putting all the facts on the table to make the right decision.
Yeah, I suppose I just want to pull you up on right decision, because that was one of the things I had in my head in terms of, here we have the total fuel cost, the voyage cost, the CO2 emissions, but also arrival time. There's so many different parameters on this sheet. How do you go about knowing which one is optimal? Like, what is optimal and to whom? Is it cost, environmental, safety? Mark, talk me through that.
It's basically, what is the definition of the optimum route? Well, it depends on, each route is unique. It can be, for this particular voyage, an ETA time is crucial, because its raw material, and there's a potential factory shutdown. So then you don't care about the fuel consumption. The ETA time is the most important one. So you go full steam. Savings is not important. ETA time is important because you want to prevent that plant shutdown. Because if it shuts down, it can take days to bring it up to speed again. If you have all the time in the world, and then you can take it as slow as you want, and go as efficient as you want. And then the optimum route is maximum savings. So it all depends on the contract, on the stakeholders. What do they find for this particular ship, with this particular cargo, on this particular route, the most important? And that's the optimum route.
That makes total sense, especially with all the different players that you've got here and the different types of cargo. And then the different, I'm going to call them obstacles that you'll come across in terms of a port not being available for you to dock. So it's not just a case of just gathering the data. It's analyzing it in a different way depending on what is seen as best. So talk me through, right, how you go about, because, to get these number of parameters through is a no mean feat. And so you're going to need so many sensors and so much data. Michael, how do you go about, I've heard you that you use digital twin technology, and digital twins mean different things to different people, but how do you use that technology, the data, and I assume AI, to be able to gather all this information and then put it together in what is basically one side of paper, which is incredible?
Yeah. I think that there's really two stages, right? There's the say onboarding of the customer. So when we talk with who that client is, what are their priorities? And then we look at the vessel and voyage structure, right? So as you mentioned, on the vessel onboarding side, we have vessel performance models. We can enhance them with our partner program, with more digital twins. We have a lot of information. I think data transparency is a really key driver these days. When talking about digital twin, I think it's important to kind of explain that you may have sister vessels. Sister vessels are built at the same yard, same specifications, same engine. They should be performing exactly the same. But if one vessel has been operating, say, in open ocean, and one vessel has been operating coastal voyages in warm waters, or it may have different hull fouling, right? A growth on the hull or impact on the engine or whatever it is, that you would start to see these two vessels diverge into what they're performing in. So the digital twin shows us what that vessel is capable of doing in different weather conditions. So we have that data coming in of what the vessel has been doing, and we build that into the model of then what we expect it to do in the forecast, right? Or in the route simulation. So we take all of these ingredients that come in and kind of this initial setup and understand what makes that voyage optimal, and the stakeholders involved, as Mark said, and then we weave that into the output of that particular model. And whether, as I said before, whether if it's from the direct shoreside operation analyst, or if that goes into the API, which is now driven by kind of this digitalization and integration, it's all built into the algorithm, the intelligence behind the route optimization.
Understood. So just in terms of, to summarize all of this, because there is so much data, so much information. So you kind of look at the ship as an individual, I suppose. I think you call them like the vessel insights. And so it's kind of what is happening on the ship right now, isn't it? And then you look at the route, and in terms of what do you need to know about the route? What type of areas do you need to avoid? What weather might be happening in certain areas? But then you can combine the two, that once you've actually picked a route that works, you can then also look at how the ship interacts with that route. So in terms of the speeds it might take at different periods of that route to avoid high wave heights or something like that. So there's so many different things coming into play. How do you communicate that to this vessel that is out there in the middle of nowhere? Mark, how do you go about that?
It can be as simple as in a PDF. So we put all the information in 2-3 pages, send it by email, together with a digital format, which they can then upload also in the systems on the bridge. And they can run it in that other system, like a navigation system.
And does that just work? Is it like one per voyage, or could it change when a ship has actually gone out on that route? Are there updates that come in, or is it kind of like, you're done, good luck?
Yeah, it's not what we call is we send the initial route recommendation, and that's basically the entire voyage. And then when the vessel starts sailing, the next day we're going to check, is the route we generated yesterday, is that still the best optimum route? Because the weather has been changing in the meantime. That could mean, hey, we need to slightly change the route we recommended yesterday. And that's like an ongoing process.
And this makes sense when a voyage, we're not talking about a couple of hours here. We're talking about 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I think the really key part here is that we're not just sending data to the vessel or to the operator and say, okay, we're collecting the data, here you go. What we do is we collect the data and we create actionable insight, right? We look at this storm, we look at this vessel, we look at this required arrival time, whatever it is, the ingredients that going into that particular one. And our analysts and our engine and algorithm, it works essentially as a bit of a hybrid, right? We have AI, we have machine learning that is crunching this data, because as mentioned, there's so much coming in. And then we have analysts that are looking at that information and how to actually communicate, and we use that word a lot, communicate that value creation to the captain, to the operator. So we want them to understand what the impact is on their business, whether it's, again, safety, fuel savings, emission savings, arrival times. So we're not just sending data, right? I think that's the real key part of what we do.
So to me, it sounds brilliant, but I'm a realist as well, and I know it won't have been that easy. And so, Mark, what kind of challenges have you come across in terms of getting this digitalization systems into the industry? Because I know it won't have been easy, and I know a lot of work has been done over the past 5-6 years, but what challenges have you come across?
Oh, sometimes people say, hey, this will not work for me because I can see the other side. So the distance is so close. When I go, and I will make it. And then you have to really convince them and saying, okay, it won't come as a cost. I will take the cost. I will put in all the effort. Just give me a few captains who are willing to work with us. And let's do it for a month. And then we talk again. And then they can see and experience what we really can do. They see the benefit. And 9 out of 10, before the end date, they contact us and say, hey, put it on all the ships. Because this is indeed a no-brainer. This is giving me so much added value, or solving so many problems. I still remember a case where a client who was sailing their fleet in short sea, and short sea means short distances along the coast, and saying, I can see the other side. I don't need red routing. And after a month, he called me, you get the entire fleet, do it. And it turns out that ETA times were really interesting for him, and predicting the ETA times. Because in their business, the client could refuse the cargo if they are late. So then you are, in worst case, you have a vessel full with cargo, and the end client doesn't want the cargo anymore. So you cannot reuse the ship because it's still full. And you have to find another client who's willing to buy that cargo. And of course, there are people willing to do so, but not at the same cost. So it's really tricky.
That's Really interesting. And it highlights that there's these drivers for this change. So yes, the driver, the main driver was COVID, of where we couldn't have that interaction physically. But like you said, there's sort of like that knowledge of knowing what the ETAs at the port will be. What other drivers might there be? Like, does safety come into it? Talk me through the other drivers.
Of course, safety is always a massive part of what we do. Safety first.
Understood.
But you cannot always sail the safest route, because economically that's not a responsible thing to do. So you have to sail on the edge. And there we come in, giving you the safest route, but still doing economically the smart thing.
Yeah, it's called smart implementation for a reason, isn't it? It's using this data, analyzing it, and coming up with the smartest way to utilize that data for the route. And I am really intrigued that this change came, 5-6 years ago. It really accelerated. So I'm keen to look at the future and the next 10 years and the changes we might see. So how might the experience of a ship's captain change in the next decade, Michael?
That is certainly a great question, because that is the very point where we are right now, right? And I think the real key part is what we're seeing now in this generation of new captains, digitally native, right? And these captains, as they gain experience, and I mean, autonomous vessels is a separate subject that I can touch on in just a moment. But the actual vessels that will have captains, these captains are ones that have grown up in a digital world. So as we see more and more positions being led by digitally native people, we certainly see this kind of trust and expansion of digitalization in maritime. And then the separate part I mentioned before, this drive to autonomous vessels. What that's going to be, I think we're still in a position of, would we see something where maybe some feeder vessels could be fully autonomous? The key is data's driving a lot of that decision making. Again, talking about data into insight and impact. So we're positioning ourselves to be future proof, to be able to help whichever pillar that the market goes down.
And that makes total sense, because I'm assuming here, but a lot of your captains, I assume, are of an older generation, and therefore they have that experience. They have the decades of experience that they've obtained in an analog way without the digitalization. But since the implementation of the digitalization, the captains that are joining the fleet, they won't be able to gain that experience. And so in a way, their experience will be intertwined with the digitalization. And so it'll be more second nature.
Yeah, and we have to fill that knowledge gap with technology.
Absolutely, because you're not born knowing all the answers.
And the average age of a captain is 55. That means in 10 years' time, the majority will retire. So we don't have enough captains to put on all the ships. So we have to fill that knowledge gap with technology.
That is really fascinating, that the capability to do that is there. And so to both of you, what are you most excited about coming in the future, the thing that's on the horizon?
Well, for me, it's the boom of technology. All the startups that are popping up with new ideas, and the cooperation, and the possibility to connect all the different technologies, all those different players with each other. So everybody's doing what they do best. Yeah? So you don't fight each other over a particular client. No, we work together, because you have some expertise, I have some expertise. If we combine it, the end result always will be better. And if you then combine all the different technologies and all those different companies together, you can build amazing solutions.
That is really lovely to hear, in this world of where people often think of companies working against each other, but you're saying partnerships are the key to us making a difference in the future.
I think to add to that, it really is amazing this share to gain approach that we've seen driven by digitalization in the last few years. I think ecosystems, and whether they're technology or platform or hub and spoke, I mentioned before, this kind of share to gain mentality and data transparency is really a driver that we're seeing now. And I think the other thing, and I was surprised Mark didn't say it this way, because he's really leading this on our team, is wind power.
Oh yeah,
I think we're just on the early. Well, not I think we are just on the early stages right now of how wind power is affecting and will impact and will drive the industry. You've got the rotor technologies. I mean, and again, data transparency as coming into this full technology based. And you compare that to 100 years ago when you had a sail and basically you had some standard charts. Now we're fully able to marry the whole thing together. And I think that with wind power, we're going to see dramatic fuel savings, emissions reduction, and a whole new way to approach route selection and structure. So I think that, to me, that's very exciting.
Now, that is an answer I was not expecting, but thank you so much, because as a person that orders a good and then it ends up in a shop and I pick it up, the stuff that goes on behind the scene within the maritime industry is so mind-opening. And so thank you so much for making it so clear. And thank you for joining me today. It's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate the discussion. I think from our side, something we're passionate about. It really is amazing how much is impacted by seaborne transport. 90% of everything is moved that way, and so from our side, it's a really big out of sight, out of mind type industry. So we really appreciate the chance to put some highlight on that and really see where things are going.
Thank you to Michael and Mark. That was absolutely fascinating. And we have actually got one last bonus episode to wrap up the season. But don't you worry, because the Process Automation Podcast will be back for another season. And this time, we really want your input. So what topics should we explore in 2026? You'll find a link in the episode description to ABB's website, where you can share your ideas through a quick form. And if you're an expert who would like to join us on the show, we would love to hear about your area of expertise. I'm Fran Scott, and the Process Automation Podcast is a Fresh Air production for ABB. Follow now for free wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.